You know that feeling when you're standing in front of a closed door? Like your hand is just hovering right over the cold brass knob.
Oh, yeah. Your heart is just hammering against your ribs.
Exactly. You get that slight narrowing of your vision, the cold sweat on your palms,
Yeah.
and you know exactly what is waiting for you on the other side.
Right. It could be a boss you finally have to confront or, a friend you owe a massive apology to.
Or a stage you have to walk onto. And the wild thing about that moment is the physics of it. I mean, the physical act of turning a brass knob requires almost 0 calories of energy, right?
Yeah, a toddler could literally do it.
Exactly. A toddler does it easily. But mentally, in that specific fraction of a second, the weight of that knob feels like 1,000 pounds.
Well, because the resistance has nothing to do with the door. The friction comes from this subconscious realization that the person who turns the knob cannot be the exact same person who's currently standing in the hallway.
Wow. Yeah.
They are about to cross a line, and crossing it requires, leaving a version of yourself behind.
Leaving a version of yourself behind. That concept is honestly the absolute perfect entry point for what we are getting into today. So welcome everyone to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are, as always, going after those profound aha moments without the information overload. And today we're unpacking this fascinating document we have on the table. It's a compilation titled Day 100 The 10 Trees.dossier.pdf.
Which is such a great title.
It really is. And it's this crazy mosaic of wisdom. It pulls from literature, philosophy, military history, spirituality, all centered around this one theme, Day 100.
And we really need to clarify what the source means by Day 100 before we get into the heavy hitters like Winston Churchill or Mother Teresa. Because, that frames everything else. We always talk about Day 1, right? Day 1 of a diet, Day 1 of a new job.
Yeah, Day 1 is fun. It's fueled by adrenaline.
Exactly. Novelty. But Day 100 is something entirely different. By Day 100, the applause is completely stopped.
The novelty is dead. Day 100 is the moment a conscious effort either, dissolves into an automatic part of who you are or it completely collapses.
It is the ultimate threshold.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the anatomy of these thresholds. We want to explore how we face crises, why discomfort is actually a feature and not a bug, and how you can navigate this daily act of becoming without feeling totally overwhelmed.
Yeah, and the sources in this document are wild. It goes from the gritty reality of Fight Club to the spiritual insights of Mother Teresa.
Right, and they all argue that the quality of our lives depends entirely on how we approach that edge of the unknown. So let's just jump right into the inner game, the anatomy of a threshold.
Let's do it.
The document builds everything on this foundational claim from the author Barb Rogers. She says life can be fascinating and frightening, but it shouldn't be overwhelming.
Which is a bold claim.
Very bold. And her reasoning is that we've been endowed with all the tools required to deal with it. Not some of the tools, all of them.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this because I have to push back a little here. Is this just, like, naive optimism? What if someone loses their home overnight? Telling them they have all the tools sounds kind of dismissive.
I get why it sounds that way, but it's only dismissive if you misinterpret what a tool actually is. Rogers grants life its full, frightening weight. She isn't promising life is easy.
Okay, so what does she mean?
Think of a carpenter with a full toolbox facing a massive, rotting house that needs to be rebuilt. Having the hammers and the saws doesn't mean the work won't cause blisters and exhaustion, right?
Oh, I see.
It just means the capacity to do the work is there. The true tension isn't whether life is hard, it's whether or not we will actually open the toolbox and use the tools we arrived with.
Got it. Because picking up the tool means admitting the house is rotting and you actually have to do the work.
Exactly, and that refusal almost always happens right at the edge of a new experience. Stephen Pressfield calls this the threshold crossing.
Right, that storytelling beat where the protagonist has to leave the safe world for the unknown.
Yeah, and to show what that crossing actually feels like, the source pulls this brilliant example from Chuck Palahniuk and David Fincher's Fight Club.
Oh man, this scene, his condo has just been destroyed. Everything he owned is in ashes.
He's sitting in a dark bar with Tyler Durden, and he desperately needs a place to stay. Tyler knows this, but he refuses to just offer the couch.
Right, he makes him ask for it out loud.
Tyler says, "Ask me, say it." He forces the threshold crossing.
And it takes the narrator 10 agonizing tries to say 4 words, "Can I stay with you?"
It's so uncomfortable.
It really is. It takes 10 tries. And it made me think of standing on the edge of a high dive.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, like the physical act of jumping isn't what's hard. Gravity does all the work. But standing up there, shivering for 10 minutes while the line builds up that hesitation, is the mental cost of surrendering the person you were before the jump.
The safely dry person.
Exactly. The narrator's 10 tries in Fight Club were 10 rounds of internal combat. He was killing off his old ego.
And that combat is backed up by some heavy philosophical hitters in the text. Lao Tzu mapped this out centuries ago. He wrote, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." Yeah, the old self is literally a skin to be shed. And Emerson takes it even further. He says, unless you try to do something beyond what you have already mastered, you will never grow.
Which totally flips how we usually think about mastery. We treat mastery like the finish line.
Right, you get the gold watch and coast.
But Emerson is saying mastery isn't the destination, it is merely the launching pad.
Once you master a thing, it belongs to the past.
Okay, so surrendering our old self is the ultimate internal struggle when we choose to cross a threshold. But this leads to a vital question for you listening to this right now. What happens when the threshold doesn't politely wait for you to be ready?
When it's thrust upon you.
Right, when it's violently forced on you by the outside world.
The text pivots here to Peter Drucker, the management thinker. He argues that leadership is fundamentally a foul-weather job.
A foul-weather job. I love that.
Drucker says the one predictable thing in any organization is the crisis. A crisis isn't an interruption of normal life. It is the forced threshold.
And the document uses Winston Churchill as the prime example for this, specifically his wilderness years, right?
Exactly.
He spent 12 years from 1928 all the way to Dunkirk, basically on the sidelines, just waiting.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Drucker calls what Churchill was doing threshold readiness. A leader cannot wait for a crisis to start building trust.
That's way too late.
Way too late. Drucker calls that abdication. Trust has to be built in the undramatic, boring daily moments before the ground shifts.
The document connects Churchill's 12 years of waiting to Robert Greene's Law 4 from the 48 Laws of Power. Always say less than necessary.
A very powerful law.
It is, but here's where it gets really interesting because I want to challenge this. Isn't being silent and waiting on the sidelines for a decade just a form of hiding? Or like passive anxiety?
It looks like that from the outside, but true silence requires immense discipline. Think about what people do when they're anxious.
Talk.
Exactly. They fill the silence to manage their own anxiety. They over-explain. By waiting and not doing that, Churchill preserved his authority.
Ah, I see.
The text quotes Sir Walter Raleigh on this. He says, "Undutiful words of a subject do often take deeper root than the memory of ill deeds."
Meaning people remember your anxious babbling way longer than your actual mistakes.
Spot on. And Matthew McConaughey echoes this in the document in a secular way. He says, be less impressed and more involved. It's about depth over noise.
Depth over noise. So whether a threshold is forced by a historic crisis or chosen through silent restraint, the crossing always exacts a toll. There's always friction.
Always. And the friction we feel in those moments isn't a sign that something is wrong. It is the exact mechanism of our transformation.
Which brings us to this idea that pain is the tuition.
Yes. The growth through discomfort.
The source brings in Mary Tyler Moore here, and her words actually appear twice in the collection. She says, pain nourishes courage. You can't be brave if you've only had wonderful things happen to you.
It's so true.
And it's so countercultural. In our modern world, we treat discomfort as a design error, something to be managed away with an app or a pill.
But the text is arguing that pain is the required raw material. Think back to the Fight Club narrator. He didn't become his new self in spite of his 10 painful failed attempts.
Right.
He became that person through them. Each failure systematically eroded his resistance. Courage is just the willingness to keep going while trembling.
It's like resistance training. The text quotes Joseph Addison saying, reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body. And if we build on that, crossing a threshold is literally resistance training for the soul.
That's exactly how it works.
When you lift weights, your physical muscle requires the pain of micro tears to grow. The friction is the point. You don't get stronger without the damage.
What's fascinating here is how this ties into Buddha's ultimate formulation. There is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path.
Yeah, that blew my mind a little.
Right, because a life without thresholds, without that friction or those micro tears, would essentially be a kind of psychological death.
It loops back perfectly to Woodrow Kroll's theological injunction in the text.
Yep.
Be confident, God is able. Which brings us right back to Barb Rogers.
You have the tool.
The source is never in question. The capacity is there.
Always.
But If these painful attempts are not just a prologue to the good stuff, but the actual substance of a meaningful life, we have to figure out how to practice this.
Practically speaking,
Yeah, how do you cross thresholds on a random, boring Tuesday?
that is the danger of the grand narrative. If we only talk about Dunkirk and Fight Club, transformation sounds like a historic, once-in-a-lifetime event.
Right, but my inbox doesn't feel like Dunkirk.
Exactly. But the source text is filled with quiet instructions for ordinary days. Things like calm body, quiet mind, or show up, honest effort, make a difference.
I love that one anonymous line from the text. The world responds to seed, not need.
That distinction is crucial.
It really is. Because need is passive. Need is sitting there waiting for HR to fix your toxic workplace. But seed is the daily micro-commitment.
Planting a seed accumulates invisibly.
Right. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Muhammad Ali has this famous rebuke to the waiting life. Don't count the days, make the days count.
Action over passivity.
Yes, and William Ellery Channing amplifies that urgency in the text. He says, the longer I live, the more things I must complete.
Time doesn't reduce the work.
Exactly. It just clarifies the urgency of it.
This raises an important question, though. What actually fuels this daily urgency? Where do we get the stamina for these boring Tuesdays?
The document points to a really deep spiritual undercurrent.
Right. Leo Tolstoy is quoted arguing that understanding our divine nature has direct consequences for our behavior.
You can't unsee it once you know.
Exactly. You cannot know what you are truly capable of and then go live as though you were capable of less. It breaks you.
And Mother Teresa brings the sharpest practical test to this daily grind. She says, if you judge people, you have no time to love them.
That quote hits hard.
It really does. Because judgment is just standing safely at the threshold, keeping your distance.
It's risk-free.
Right. But love is the act of crossing into someone else's reality. Giuseppe Mazzini connects this deep purpose to our speed. He says, the further any purpose, the faster we should work toward it.
There is no time to waste standing at the door.
And the section closes with Emerson's profound thought. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. Every crossing, ultimately, is a crossing toward yourself.
Stripping away the expectations.
So let's summarize this journey for everyone listening. We've explored day 100, this unglamorous threshold where your commitments either dissolve back into your old habits or they crystallize into your identity.
And it brings us right back to Barb Rogers' promise. Life doesn't have to be overwhelming.
No.
We carry the capacity for courage, which is built through pain. We have readiness built through daily practice. And we have restraint as a form of power.
You have the tools. Cross it. Say it. Do the work. The world responds to seed.
Turn the brass knob.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to ponder entirely on your own. Emerson taught us that mastery is not a destination, but a launching pad.
The moment a thing is mastered, it becomes the past.
Exactly. So if arriving at day 100 means you have successfully mastered a commitment, what beloved part of your new day 100 self must you immediately surrender and shed on day 101 so that your hard-won growth doesn't silently become your brand new comfort zone?